If your fashion wish list lives rent-free in your brain, you need to be on Poshmark. With Poshmark, you're shopping millions of listings from thousands of closets, each curated by someone with their own style. Vintage finds, designer pieces, and everyday staples all in one place. Search for your favorites or let the discovery come to you. Poshmark makes it easy to find what you actually want to wear at prices that feel like a quiet win. Download the Poshmark app today and use code PODCAST10 when you sign up to get $10 off your first purchase.
What if you know you need to get away, but you don't actually want to sell everything you own, quit your job forever, and become a full-time nomad? For a long time, it seemed like there were only two choices: take a vacation, come home, and return to the same life, or completely blow up that life and travel full-time. But there's a very important option between those two extremes. It's called a travel reset. And it's the reason I'm no longer talking only about full-time travel. Hello, and welcome to How to Travel Full-Time, the podcast about how to use travel to create a life that feels more like your own. I'm your host, certified professional coach, TEDx speaker, and New York Times featured travel reset catalyst, Heather Markel. I'm excited to help you lean into your own transformative travel experience with tips, real-life stories, and strategies from someone who's been living the travel lifestyle since 2018. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome, or welcome back, to How to Travel Full-Time. Hey, it's been a while since I released a new episode, and during my break, something important became much clearer to me. The work I'm doing is evolving. I'm still a full-time traveler. Look, I've been traveling full-time since 2018, and don't worry, I'm not planning to suddenly settle down, buy new furniture, and start redecorating a new home. My full-time travel experience remains a huge part of what I teach. But I've realized that full-time travel is not the only way that travel can transform a life. And in fact, it may not be the right answer for most of the people who need a significant change. A lot of people do not want to travel forever. They don't necessarily want to become digital nomads or give away everything they own or spend the rest of their lives studying visa regulations. What they do want is enough time and space to breathe. They want to step away from a life that no longer feels like theirs. They want to remember who they were before their job, their marriage, their responsibilities, grief, burnout, or other people's expectations became their entire identity, and I can so relate with you. They want enough time away to think clearly about what comes next. And that is something that a 7-day vacation usually can't give you. But it doesn't require a permanent travel lifestyle either. It may require a travel reset. Now make sure to check out the show notes in today's episode because I have some live calls coming up that I'll talk about at the end of today's episode, and I'd love to have you there. So let me tell you a little bit about what's behind this change. So when I left my corporate career in 2018, my original plan was to take a 6-month career break. I was actually not planning to become a full-time traveler, and I certainly was not planning to get rid of my apartment and put my belongings in storage indefinitely. I just knew I needed a break. Because, look, if you're not new to my podcast, you know that I spent more than 25 years building a successful corporate career. So on paper, I had done most of the things that we're told responsible adults are supposed to do. Had the job, the marriage, the grown-up apartment. But eventually, I had to admit that the life that I had worked so hard to build just did not feel like the life I wanted to live. And that was really difficult for me to fully acknowledge, and it took a long time. because it is really inconvenient when you have checked all the boxes for the life that you're supposed to lead, and then you discover you might have been filling out the wrong form. I needed time away from my familiar routines and identity. I needed to find out who I was when I wasn't being defined by my job or my schedule or everyone else's expectations. So I planned a career break to travel. That break eventually turned into the full-time travel life that I'm living today. But the important point here is that I didn't need to know all that at the beginning. I didn't need to make a decision about the rest of my life before I was allowed to begin changing it. I only needed to plan my next chapter. And that is one of the biggest lessons that travel has taught me. You don't always need a permanent answer. Sometimes you need enough distance from your current life to hear your own thoughts again. So, for years now, most of my work has been focused on helping people travel full-time. I taught people how to afford it, how to handle the logistics, and how to create a sustainable travel lifestyle. And that work is still relevant. Full-time travel remains a wonderful option for the person who wants to do it. But I began to notice something. Many people were fascinated by full-time travel, but they didn't necessarily want to do it forever. But they did want a few things. They wanted the freedom that they associated with the lifestyle. They wanted the sense of possibility. They wanted relief from their current routine and more time to explore the world and reconsider their direction. But when they heard the words full-time travel, they assumed they had to make a dramatic, permanent decision. Sell the home, quit the job forever, get rid of your furniture, right? Become someone who owns 6 shirts and has really strong opinions about packing cubes. I do. Okay. Well, that made the possibility just feel too extreme. So even though they desperately needed a change, they didn't do anything to make it happen. And so what I now understand more clearly is this. Full-time travel is one possible destination, and a travel reset is a bridge. A travel reset creates space between the life that you've been living and the life that you want to build next. You don't have to know exactly where that bridge will lead before you step onto it. Now, a vacation is not the same as a reset. So let's talk about vacations, because vacations are wonderful, right? This is not a smear campaign against vacations, but a vacation and a travel reset have very different purposes. A vacation is usually designed to give you a break from your life. A travel reset gives you enough time and distance to examine your life. A vacation can help you rest. A travel reset can help you rest, reconnect with yourself, and consciously decide what comes next. Because look, on a typical vacation, the first couple of days are you probably recovering from the journey to get there, and then you begin to relax. And just as your nervous system finally realizes that it's no longer being hunted by your inbox, it's time to pack, check out, and go home. And then you go home with lovely photographs and a huge credit card bill, but the fundamental structure of your life stays the same. A travel reset is more intentional. It could last 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or longer. It gives you time to move beyond the vacation mindset. You stop trying to squeeze in every attraction and restaurant and local landmark into 7 days, and instead, you live at a very different pace. And you start noticing and paying attention to the things that give you energy. You notice what you really don't miss. And you start distinguishing between the parts of your life you genuinely value and the parts you've been maintaining because you thought you were supposed to. And that is where travel becomes more than just an escape. It becomes a tool for reinvention. So let's talk about this missing middle piece for a minute, right? Between, vacation which is at one end, which is 1 or 2 weeks away, followed by a return to a regular life, and the other end where we have full-time travel, which is a major lifestyle change with no immediate end date. But what about that space in between? What about taking 1 to 6 months to travel? That amount of time can be long enough to experience a meaningful shift without requiring you to make a permanent commitment or sell your home or pack up all your stuff. For someone recovering from burnout, it could mean time to rest without immediately rushing into the next position. For someone going through a divorce, grief, empty nesting, or another major life transition, it may be time to meet the person that you've become now. Who you are now, as you know, is different than who you used to be. And a lot of times in our busy lives, we haven't made the time to catch up. Now, for someone who has spent decades building a career but feels more and more disconnected from it, it may be time to consider what kind of work or life they want next. Now, a travel reset can also be useful before a major decision. You may ultimately decide to return to your career, but with different boundaries. You might choose a new career or reduce your hours. You might begin consulting or relocate, or maybe you do pursue full-time travel. But the reset itself does not dictate the answer. It does, however, create the conditions in which you can discover your answer. Now, an important thing is you don't have to blow up your future. Because look, one of the biggest fears I hear around doing this is some version of, I want to do this, but I can't destroy everything that I've spent decades building. And that makes complete sense. By midlife, you may have a mortgage, retirement savings, health concerns, family responsibilities, or maybe even a career reputation that you've worked very hard to establish. You are not a 22-year-old backpacker deciding whether to spend the rest of the semester in Thailand. You have a future to protect. But taking a travel reset does not have to mean setting fire to your financial security and walking away while dramatically pulling a suitcase behind you. It can be planned. You can determine what you can realistically afford. You can decide how much financial cushioning you need. You can look at your housing, your healthcare, your career options, timing, responsibilities, and even your reentry plan before you leave. You can design a reset that feels meaningful without making it reckless. And that is an important part of my work now, helping people understand that travel and responsibility are not opposites. You don't have to choose between feeling alive and having a future. The goal is to create a travel reset that supports both. Now, here's an important thing that I've come to realize. Identity should come before itinerary. So look, when people begin imagining a longer period of travel, they usually start with destinations, right? Where should I go? And how should I get there? And which countries can I afford? Do I need a visa? Whew, right? It's a long list of questions. And yes, all of those questions matter, but they are not the first questions. The first question is, what do you need this travel reset to do for you? Do you need deep rest? Do you need adventure after years of predictability? Do you need to rebuild confidence after a divorce, a job loss, or a difficult transition? Your purpose should shape your travel plan. Someone who needs physical and emotional rest shouldn't design the same itinerary as someone who wants challenge and adventure. Someone trying to reconnect with themselves might need a slower pace and longer stays. Not a 6-country itinerary where you change locations every few days. That is why I say identity first and logistics second. Your reset is not simply about where you go. It's about who you need the time and space to become. So, what does this evolution mean for my podcast, How to Travel Full-Time? Well, I'm keeping the name. Full-time travel is still my life, my experience, and an important possibility that we'll continue to discuss. but the conversation is just getting bigger. We'll talk about travel resets, career breaks, sabbaticals, midlife transitions, and the practical and emotional work involved in stepping away. We'll talk about money, not only what travel costs, but how to design your reset that doesn't undermine your long-term security. We'll talk about logistics, housing, healthcare, visas, destinations, pacing, what to do with all your stuff, right? And we'll also talk about identity. Who are you without the job title? What happens when you slow down enough to notice what you actually want? How do you return from a reset without falling directly back into the life you needed to escape? And yes, we'll continue talking about full-time travel for those who discover that a few months simply aren't enough. You don't have to become, though, a full-time traveler to belong here. You only need to be curious about what might become possible if you gave yourself more than a vacation. So here's an action for this week. Complete this sentence. If I had 3 months away from my current routine, I would want that time to help me complete that sentence. Again, if I had 3 months away from my current routine, I'd want that time to help me what? Don't begin with a destination. Don't begin with a budget. And please don't open a spreadsheet yet. I know some of you probably have 47 of them. Begin with what you need. Maybe you want that time to help you rest. Maybe you want to rebuild your confidence. Just write down the first honest answer that comes to mind. That answer is the beginning of your travel reset, not the plane ticket. Now, if this episode has you wondering whether a travel reset could be right for you, I'd love to invite you to one of my upcoming live calls that I mentioned at the top of this episode about how to take a travel reset without blowing up your future. We'll talk about how to create meaningful time away while protecting the financial security, career capital, and future that you have spent decades building. This is not a call about quitting impulsively, booking a one-way ticket tonight, or moving into a van that you found on Facebook Marketplace. It's about creating a thoughtful, realistic plan for stepping away and returning with more clarity about what comes next. I'll put the link to the upcoming calls in the show notes, so please be sure to scroll down to learn more, and you do need to register to attend. So there'll be a few different calls. Just pick the date and time that works for you. You're welcome to attend more than once if you like. They are free, and just make sure you register, and I'd love to see you there. So in closing, you don't have to choose between a 1-week vacation and leaving your entire life forever. You may simply need a bridge. A travel reset can give you enough time to breathe, reconnect with yourself, and decide what you want your next chapter to become. Full-time travel is one possible destination, but it's no longer the only journey that we will talk about here. I'm glad to be back, and I'm very glad you're here for this next chapter. Talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. If this episode got you wanting more information about how to create the space for a travel reset, I invite you to visit the Travel Reset Planning Library. You'll find practical resources to help you explore where to go, what your reset could look like, how to afford it, and how to start planning without creating 17 spreadsheets and a small emotional support binder. You'll find the link to it in the show notes. And be sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Until then, remember, you don't have to blow up your future to create space for a future that fits you better.